Hey everyone, what's up? How's it going? This is Finite MTG, and today I am back with a really sweet Chaos Draft video for you guys. This is a deck I'm proud to have drafted. There's one really difficult decision point, in my opinion, during the draft, and I think I made it correctly. Let's go over the picks. So first off here, we have a pack that seems to have 3 rares and only really had 2. This was upshifted recently in Double Masters. It was an uncommon in this pack. But we have a foil Gigantiform. This card is one that got underrated a lot in Triple Zendikar. People don't like the idea of getting 2 for 1, I guess, just putting an aura on something, but sometimes the upside is so big, and I mean that literally, that it's worth it. There's also an excellent removal spell here in Journey to Nowhere. Vampire Hexmage, nice aggressive threat. Another Double Masters reprint there. And there's just Jwar Sphinx over here. This card is an unbelievable bomb. One of the most infuriating cards to play against. And really nice one to first pick here. A little slow for Triple Zendikar, but this card was still just flat out amazing. So very happy to start the draft with that one. We're going to try to be blue if possible, but hopefully without forcing. All right, next pick here, and this, other than the decision point that I'm going to talk about later, is one of the hardest picks in my opinion. Got another one from the original Zendikar block here, Rise of the Eldrazi pack. This is a pick that I'm not sure that I made correctly. So we have Boar Umbra here as a +3/+3 totem armor. So kind of an Oaken form, but strictly better, so that's pretty nice. We have Heat Ray here. Not the most efficient removal spell, but scales decently, which is pretty rare among red removal spells. We have Sea Beyond here, kind of like a Tormenting Voice style effect, but for blue, which means you draw the cards first. Kind of like a Chart a Course too, but without the raid. There's also just a Mnemonic Wall. This card is pretty powerful, but you do have to be in the right deck for it. There are some loops you can do with this card that are pretty fun. Stuff with like Repeal, Blink of an Eye, that kind of thing, where you're spending 1,000,000 mana to draw one card at a time or get as many free chump blocks as you want. I ended up going here with the Boar Umbra. Despite being off color and a bit of a non-bow with the Sphinx itself, because with Shroud, of course, you're not putting too many Umbras on it. I just thought this card was the biggest signal in the pack, probably the strongest card in the pack. I think there's a strong case for Mnemonic Wall if you want to take that and try to stay with some kind of controlling blue plan. I think that's super reasonable. I think you could even justify Sea Beyond here. I don't think I take Heat Ray out of this pack ever, but I ended up going with the Boar Umbra, and part of that is my creature bias. Another part of that is me thinking that if I end up in green, then I can pick up some ramp for the Sphinx. So we took the Umbra here. All right, next up here, we have another solid green card in the Hunting Moa. This card's decent despite having Echo, which generally is a clunky ability. Prismatic Lens, really nice ramp piece. But there's also Looter Il-Kor. Card's so good that it shows up in Cube. Mainly there, I imagine, for the Reanimator decks, but even without Reanimator, the card's still going to be a very strong effect for us. This is a reason to stay in blue for certain, along with our Sphinx, so doesn't feel like we're forcing, which is nice. And yeah, that was my pick. All right, next up we see a much weaker pack. There's a Carrion Feeder, which is not a bad card. There's also Rain of Blades, the kind of effect that I really like in Chaos. Don't love anything here in blue, but I do like Fierce Empath. We already have a green card, and this thing can find presumably what'll be the best card in our deck, that Jwar Sphinx. So yeah, this thing can be suited up with the Boar Umbra, turn into a real threat. The fact that it's a 2 for 1 is nice, and green we're going to look to pick up some ramp, like I said, and to pick up some more 6-drops. So I like the Fierce Empath here. We have a plan for certain. All right, next up in this pack, once again, monocolored cards tend to be pretty weak in the original Ravnica, but we do have a Peel from Reality here, a card that I like a decent amount. It's not an amazing card unless you're able to hold up mana a lot of the time, use it in response to removal, that kind of thing. Or if you're able to reuse some really nice ETBs. Right now we can bounce our 3 mana 1/1 that we just picked up. It's kind of a slow play, but it could be worth it depending. So happy enough with appeal here. At this point we're actively trying to play blue. And speaking of blue, there are a couple playable blue cards in this pack. There's Unity of Purpose, decent combat trick. There's Umara Entangler, nice card for the kind of aggressive spells decks. There's also just a Loam Larva, which we've mentioned a couple times. We're looking for some ramp for that Sphinx. This card is not ramp, but it does help you hit your land drop. It's not card advantage, so that's the reason it's still in the pack, but it's just a decent option that I would consider playing in a deck like this. However, I end up going with the Kozilek's Pathfinder here. So not super likely to be able to activate that ability, but 6 mana 5/5 in Chaos Draft is an acceptable rate. I like how easy it is to cast, and I like that it's another hit for that 3 mana 1/1 that can find us a 6-drop or bigger. So yeah, let's take the Pathfinder. Alright, next up, we've mentioned ramp 3 times now. Well, we finally get some here with the Primal Growth. Sleeping Potion is the kind of card that could be okay if there weren't so many different targeted effects running around in Chaos Draft. I like this card actually quite a bit in the IPA flashback. If you're able to pick up some Flag Bearers, then you can prevent that creature from being targeted and then the potion doesn't fall off. But Primal Growth is exactly what we're looking for here, so happy to pick that one up. Alright, now we see a super late rare, and it's the Engulf the Shore, which is pretty decent tempo-based effect. It's not a sweeper, it doesn't really answer anything permanently, but it's nice with ETBs. There's also like a Macabre Waltz, which is fine, and some mediocre green cards, but yeah, pretty surprised and happy to get this late of a blue rare. It's starting to feel like blue is legitimately open. Alright, now in this pack, there's not a whole lot going on. Kind of a hill giant here in the Nimana Sellsword. I'm looking at maybe being able to side in a Trailblazer's Boots at one point, or just taking an unplayable blue card for signaling purposes. I end up going with the Boots, but yeah, I think this pick is kind of irrelevant. Alright, now we get one of the better cards back from this Rise of the Eldrazi pack here in Sea Beyond. So yeah, this card, totally solid effect, good at mitigating flood. I really like the flexibility it provides over Tormenting Voice, being able to draw the cards first, then effectively discard after. And yeah, just happy again to pick up another blue card. Speaking of blue cards, we're going to pick up a Clock Spinning here. It's not a playable one. This pick is purely for signaling. And this one is playable. We get a Coast Watcher here. This is a card we were eyeing originally in the pack just as a sideboard card. 2 mana 1/1 flyer, not a card I ever want to play, but 2 mana 1/1 flyer can block forever. That sounds pretty decent to me. So yeah, happy enough getting a Coast Watcher there. Now we take an unplayable colorless card. This thing is such a far cry from Icy. I feel like I shouldn't even point out that they do something similar. So yeah, we're going to take the Snare but never play it here. And get to pass a random white card, try to let someone know that white is open by taking this Forest, and we are forced to take this terrible card. Alright, this is where things get really, really difficult and interesting. So we have Grind Clock, which is a card that some people swear is a very good win condition, and I buy that if you are playing the right kind of deck. I think it needs to be very slow, very controlling, but one of the things that I like is it's not very easy to remove this, and it does inevitably win the game on its own regardless of what the board looks like, unless you're getting killed on board. There's also Contagion Clasp, and this card is very, very strong. We are in green-blue, which means that we are the colors most likely to use counters, specifically +1/+1 counters. So Proliferate maybe will have some additional value for us than just increasing the number of -1/-1 counters on that one creature. But then there's probably the best uncommon in the whole set in Skinrender. 4 mana 3/3, put 3 -1/-1 counters on target creature. I'm talking FTK effects. This thing doesn't even matter whether it kills the creature, it's going to shrink it forever. This card is so good, and we already have 2 bounce effects. We have the one that returns a creature we control and they control to our hands, and we have that really late Engulf the Shore. So Skinrender is looking really spicy in our deck. But there's one main problem, of course, which is how are we going to play this double black card in our deck, which is definitely blue and probably green. So I tanked really, really hard on this pick because black was not very open in pack 1. There were a couple playable black cards that we saw relatively late, the Hill Giant and the Macabre Waltz to be specific, but black was not open really the entire time. So taking this now would mean that at most we have pack 2 to pick up black cards, and that would pretty much be it because we can almost definitely expect black not to be open in pack 3. The other question then is it worth giving up green? And we have some decent green cards to be sure, some synergy, some ramp, stuff that we spent relatively high picks on that I wouldn't love to give up. However, we also passed some pretty decent green cards, which means that there's a pretty decent chance we put the person who's passing to us in pack 2 into green as well. So the fact that pivoting into black here for pack 2 solves the problem of green potentially not being open in this direction, and it's such an extremely powerful synergistic card with our blue bounce spells, I decided it was just too much value. I was going to commit to black and commit to it hard, and I took the Skinrender here. All right, now we have another very difficult pick with 2 green cards, 3 blue cards, and 1 blue-black card. So both of the green cards are pretty solid. It's the kind of thing that makes me think, oh, well, you know, I could just take something safe, try to pivot back into green, and end up with a deck with a reasonable number of playables. Could take the blue-black card if I really want to commit hard to the strategy that I just went with. Or I can go for the highest upside line. I could take the Dissolve, the card that, in my opinion, is the best mono blue card in this pack, and try to wheel the Shipwreck Singer, which would be amazing for blue-black, or even one of the green cards, if that's possible, but most likely the Singer. So that's the line I ended up going with here. I took the Dissolve, figured it was an effect that we would like in this kind of deck. We already have few instants, so holding up mana is going to be something that we want to do fairly often. And yeah, really crossed my fingers, hope to get that Shipwreck Singer back. Now we're reaping the rewards of black being open here as we get past a pick 3 Daring Demolition. Just a super nice, effectively unconditional removal. Sorcery speed and double black are not ideal, but hey, not going to complain about unconditional removal in Chaos Draft, especially when we were really kind of shaky about moving into black. And yeah, look around the pack and notice that there's almost nothing going on here for blue or green. Very happy to get that Daring Demolition out of this pack. All right, next up here, I'm going to take a Screeching Buzzard. This is kind of the opposite of an Avon Fisher, 4-mana 2/2 flyer, and when it dies, each opponent discards a card. It's a bit worse than it looks because it's not going to be able to trade off very often. Your opponent's not going to want it to, or they'll get their last card out of their hand. But there's still some value in making your opponent play a little awkwardly. So I think this card is solid, if a tad worse than it looks. All right, next up here, it's a 5th Dawn pack. Once again, not exactly known for playables, and man, we get a gift out of this one. Nice Serum Visions. You see that Modern Masters reprint on that thing. This card is very, very nice. Doesn't matter that we are playing limited. Cantrips that have good card filtering attached will always be playable in limited. This thing was really a gift. Speaking of not being known for playables, we have a Betrayers of Kamigawa pack here. 0 playable blue cards, 0 playable black cards. So just gonna hate draft the best card that could theoretically have made our deck, Sakura Tribe Springcaller. This card is a decent mana dork. People don't seem to pick it very highly, and I think they should. It's one of the cards that tends to go later than a lot of the other good cards in the Kamigawa packs. All right. Next up here, we have 2 double black cards at this point. We have the Skinrender, we have the Daring Demolition, we have at least a few double blue cards as well. and so that Esper Panorama is looking prime, just kind of an Evolving Wilds. We do have to tap one additional mana to use that quote-unquote Evolving Wilds, but there's some marginal upside as well, which is that Kozilek's Pathfinder that we picked up pack 1. We can activate that now. Thanks to that tap ability, we actually have a bit of colorless mana there. Next up in this pack, it's another Kamigawa pack. I think this one is Saviors of Kamigawa. And yeah, again, nothing super exciting going on here. But Ideas Unbound, for the right kind of deck, this thing can actually be pretty insane. Unfortunately, I don't think we're the right kind of deck. We already have one counterspell. We're trying to hold up instants fairly often. But yeah, we're not exactly passing a lot here by taking it. Next up, that amazing Skin Render pack wheels. And find a Moriok Reaver here. Just a 3-mana 3/2, which is nothing to write home about. But we are looking for creatures. And this thing does its job. So yeah, not going to be unhappy about that. Now we get another godsend here. Pick 10. Shipwreck Singer. All the way around the table, back to us. We are solidly in blue-black. This is the exact kind of card we want. It's going to be amazing for us, and I am ecstatic to pick it up. Now, pack 2, pick 11 here. There are some black cards. I don't really consider them playable. I end up taking the Metallic Rebuke here. It's a card we could play, but I don't love taxing counters, so yeah, we'll think about it. All right, now pack 2, pick 12. 3-mana 1/1 forces your opponent's stuff to attack. Kind of some redundancy there with the Shipwreck Singer, but also sort of a combo. You only have to pay 1 black mana to make all your opponent's creatures attack, which is considerably cheaper than the Singer. There's also random unplayable blue card, so yeah, might as well take the kind of interesting black effect. Now in this pack we have a Gray Ogre and the Flesh Grafter. There's also random artifact discard thing, which could be a decent sideboard card if we're playing against some kind of colorless bomb, which is tough for our deck to interact with, so decide to go with that one. Now in this pack, unplayable blue card, which we will take for signaling, and a land. All right, pack 3, pick 1 here. We have decent number of blue and black cards, only 1 green card in the pack, by the way. And despite there being both a Planeswalker and a Territorial Hammerskull, there's not actually much for us. So I end up going here with a Wanted Scoundrels. This is a card that I tend to think belongs in the aggressive decks, but frankly, we have some bounce spells. We would love to be able to get in for chunks of 4 damage if possible. Not too worried about giving the opponent treasure. The blue cards in the pack are pretty medium. The Windstrider is kind of nice, but thinking I could probably wheel one of these 2-drops if we are a little short on playables, and we could main deck it. Alright, so not too much to say here, just a 5-mana 4/3 flyer, which when it deals combat damage to a player lets you scry 2. So yeah, not exactly complaining about that. This thing is very strong. Alright, now in this pack, this is another pack, I believe this is Odyssey. Not exactly known for having a ton of playables, but fortunately here, we're able to find a Repel. It's kind of funny, I think, that the Master Sets reprints kind of give away which cards are good in these packs. But Repel, speaking of tempo, just another decent bounce spell, not card disadvantage, unlike the other bounce spells tend to be. If we're trying to get in there with a 4/3, this is a card that will help us out with that. Pack 3, pick 4 here. Few decent options for us. We would love a Grim Roustabout just to be on blocks forever. Runewing, decent card, not something that I would ever be upset to play in this deck, though we do already have a lot of 4-drops. So we end up going here, speaking of tempo once again, with the Stealer of Secrets. This kind of Ophidian effect really forces the opponent to leave creatures back or just accept that they're giving us cards for free. And yeah, I think this thing is a solid filler for our curve and just a good addition to the deck. Now something unbelievable happens, and we get a Wing Splicer, pick 5. So I don't really know how this happened. I mean, I guess we did a pretty good job cutting blue, but really? The 4 people next to me didn't want a Wing Splicer? Okay, I'm not complaining. We have a ton of bounce spells. Suddenly the Engulf the Shore is looking like some real value between the Skin Render and the Wing Splicer, and the same goes for the Peel from Reality. Yeah, Wing Splicer, you just made this deck amazing. Speaking of bounce spells, here we have Jilt, a card that is straight up amazing if you're blue-red, and even though we're not blue-red, 2 mana for a bounce spell at instant speed is not bad. Better than some of the other bounce spells you'll find in Chaos Draft, and Index is unplayable, and the Zombie is very bad. So yeah, we'll take a Jilt here. Kind of wish the Esper Panorama we had earlier were a Grixis one for the sake of the Jilt, but not really in a position to complain. Speaking of Grixis, there's a Drastic Revelation. There's also a Vidalcan Ghoul. Both these cards are really terrible. So we end up just going here with the hard to cast Goblin Piker. We have one multicolored card, so this is extremely rarely going to be a 3/2 Death Touch, but more likely it'll just hang out on the sidelines and maybe we bring it in if we need a 2-drop. Alright, Pack 3, pick 8. There's a 6 mana draw 3 with some other flavor text on there, which is not the worst. This is a card that we would not mind playing in this deck. But 2 mana 1/4 is exactly what the doctor ordered. We are trying to hold the ground in the early game until we play our amazing flyers or get value out of our Skin Render and our Wing Splicer. So yeah, Dune Beetle, pretty good for us here. Now in this pack, we get our choice of Goblin Piker effect in blue. End up taking the Shipwreck Looter. I think we have one Merfolk in the deck, something like that, for the Shaper Apprentice. And this thing is fine. We have a bunch of bounce spells. Again, the Engulf the Shore. And get some incremental value there with the Raid trigger. So I think this thing could make the deck. I think it's better than like a Lurking Chupacabra. And it's easier to cast than the Grixis Grimblade. Alright, we took that Dune Beetle pretty happily earlier, 2 mana 1/4. So 3 mana 1/4, not really going to complain. This thing can't be blocked, which is probably a little less relevant than just being a mana cheaper. But yeah, still just a fine card. Now in this pack we get a Mind Burst, just a random discard effect. Not really going to play this thing ever, but Now in this pack we see a Gutter Snipe going extremely late. There's also a Traitorous Instinct card that is playable, though not super exciting. But Gutter Snipe is a card I'm afraid could make someone's deck way, way better. Don't want to give it to them disrespectfully late, so that was our hate draft. And now we get to ignore some unplayable blue cards, just take a random Infect creature and a random 3 mana 2/2, try to color screw someone or fix your own mana. And yeah, 15th pick land. So after drafting this amazing deck, I really, really wanted to do my best with it, so I called in one of the best, Jasper, aka Test Spy on Magic Online, from our recent podcast video to help me out both with the deck building and the piloting. I eventually agreed with him that I should cut the Esper Panorama because even though it is kind of an Evolving Wilds effect, look how many cards we ended up having at the 2 mana slot. It's just kind of awkward to use it there. And with a 10/7 mana base and Serum Visions, See Beyond to find that second swamp for the Daring Demolition and Skin Render, I thought it just made a lot of sense to play a 10/7 mana base. We do have some mediocre cards in the deck, like a 3 mana 3/2, but hey, this draft was all about drafting our seat as well as possible. It was not about getting a million cards that were way above the average stat line. So with that, let's move to the matches. All right, back for match number 1. Going to play first here. Nice keepable hand. Decent mana so far. And yeah. Planning on a turn 2 Beetle here into a turn 3 Hold Up Dissolve. Opponent plays Divination in enchantment form, but we draw that Shipwreck Looter and suddenly plans change. We just want to get some board presence going here. Draw a land and loot an island away. Now we have double blue and double black, which means, yeah, turn 4 we're going to be able to hold up Repel and Dissolve. Also be able to cast Skin Render or the Daring Demolition. No hurry to See Beyond here. Rather try to do that to mitigate Flood if it comes up later, than get rid of a card that we potentially might want. Not to mention not be able to hold up counter magic. Opponent cracks the Font of Fortunes. Opponent plays a 2 mana 2/1, which we are not interested in countering, bouncing, or repelling. Yeah, just fine trading with that thing. Oh, but we draw the Skin Render, and yeah, might as well use our mana well, right? So time to get that thing into play. Kill their 2/1 that we didn't care about before, but now just want to make a mana efficient play, put on some pressure. Remember, we have Jilt to bounce the Skin Render, repel if we really, really need to, and the opponent has a Divine Arrow for our Shipwreck Looter. And plays kind of a scary one here in the Angel of Flight Alabaster. But after some thinking, we realize we have a nice mana efficient way to deal with that thing. It prevents us from being able to bounce to Jilt, I should say, the Skin Render. But thanks to drawing that land, we can go Jilt the Angel, attack for 4, hold up Dissolve, and they probably are just replaying it here on their turn. Looks like that is the plan for them. So we are quickly going to dissolve that, put a Windrider Patrol to the top, and dump that thing into play, attack for another 4. And the opponent, no slouch, plays another bomb rare. This time it's a Gisela, which, yeah, lots of text on this thing, but pretty much on its own. 4 mana, 4/3, flying first strike, lifelink, kind of a Baneslayer, but smaller. Fortunately, we have Repel, which, yeah, is going to allow us to attack for 8 with them at 7. And assuming they have no Divine Arrows or counters or whatever, yeah, that's going to be the game. So with that, game 2, here we come. All right, moving on to game 2 here. Another keepable hand, missing double black, but we have the Looter to help us get there, not to mention the Sea Beyond for excess islands. Opponent this time with the more aggressive start, turn 2 Phantom Nomad. We find the Swamp for double black and put the Looter into play. Opponent plays a good equipment, attacks us for 2. We fortunately are in the rare position of being able to use an FTK effect to kill the Phantom Nomad, because this thing doesn't deal damage, puts -1, -1 counters on something. But in the meantime, we're just going to loot, see what we find. Daring Demolition, so getting rid of an island for sure. Now we're going to Sea Beyond, just use the mana. We have a lot of islands. Find a good couple of spells, so we're going to put an island away, drop an island, and yeah, plan on Skin Rending this Phantom Nomad next turn. Opponent plays another fine 2-drop, attacks us for 4, and now after we attack and loot here, get rid of the conditional counter that we didn't really want to play, we're going to Skin Rend the Nomad, but we have to think about whether we want to trade with this Boros Mastiff. If we do trade, it means there's no Jilt shenanigans in the future, but if we don't trade, it means we're taking a bunch of damage and we might really regret that play. So we end up going with the safe, kind of conservative line here of trading. Get to go ahead and attack now with a nice use of our mana lined up. We get to ditch the Swamp, play a Wanted Scoundrels, and continue to hold up that Dissolve. Opponent forecasts a Pride of the Clouds, so basically 4 mana, they get a 1/1 flyer into play, which can start chumping the Wanted Scoundrels, can be equipped with a dagger. Pretty much, it's annoying for us because we have that Dissolve mana up, and we don't want to use it. We could Jilt this thing, but it doesn't really seem worth it at this point. Rather Jilt after they've equipped or something. So we get in an attack for 5 here, goes through. We find a Shipwreck Singer, which is amazing against those birds, kills them pretty easily. So we discard the Dune Beetle, play the Singer, and we're going to hold up Dissolve once again. So opponent goes for a Plumes of Peace on the 4/3. I really wanted to counter this. I was talking to Jasper about it for a while because I thought countering this gave us some really nice pressure, but he reminded me that the opponent might have some other insane bombs that we're not able to answer in a different way, so decided to let this go through. We could always Jilt it back to our hand if we wanted, but anyway. So then the opponent goes for an equip and an attack, and At this point, we jilt the token. Now we go ahead and attack. Ditch a land here, and still holding the swamp in our hand for the looter. Opponent forecasts once again. It goes to equip, which makes it annoying because the Shipwreck Singer can't attack anymore. Now there's a Windrider Patrol, which will be a nice one to get into play here. And we draw a card and discard the Shipwreck Looter. Kind of ironic. Now we get the Windrider Patrol into play. And let's see. The opponent has another Pride of the Clouds activation. Go for no attack here, just trying to stay on defense, which makes a lot of sense. We only attack for 1 with the looter, which connects. We find Sphinx of Dwar Isle, which is a pretty insane card to find here. So we ditch the swamp and we try to resolve that thing. Luckily for us, it does resolve. Find an island on top, which means next turn we'll have Dissolve plus Repel if we want it. Opponent forecasts again. At any point, if they allow us to, we'll be able to use Shipwreck Singer to kill some of their tokens, but at this point they're just all on defense. Now we get to go for the fun play of attack with the Sphinx and the looter to try to get them to triple block. If they do triple block, we repel 1 token, kill all 3 effectively, still holding the dissolve up as well. We do go for that line, and the opponent concedes the game. So that was round number 1. All right, round number 2, we play first once again. We have kind of an awkward hand, some very, very strong cards in it, but just not enough land drops or ways to guarantee hitting lands. Kind of rare for this deck. So we have to throw it back, keep this hand pretty sadly, pitch a swamp. Opponent leading on cycling a Starling development, and they have a Makindi Slide Runner here. But fortunately we draw the Dune Beetle, which can block it very nicely. They pump the Slide Runner with a land, go to attack. We snap block. That's what 1/4s are in the deck to do. And they play a Rock Slide Elemental post-combat. Very scary card that grows whenever any creature dies. And has first strike, of course. So now we resolve a Wing Splicer, try to get the maximum amount of board presence we can into play here. Hitting our land drop, by the way, nicely. Opponent plays a Lotus Path Djinn, solid card that makes attacking with our Golem almost impossible. We do get to do it this turn while they're tapped out. Now we get to play a Screeching Buzzard, but things are not looking great for us. We are decently behind here. Now the opponent attacks with everything, which is really scary because presumably the Rock Slide Elemental doesn't get in there unless they have some way of killing something. So we're trying to figure out what they could possibly have, tank a while here, and eventually conclude that they don't make this attack unless the Elemental can be pumped at least once, which means it's not even worth blocking here. So we just end up putting the 1/4 on the 3/2 to try to prevent the highest number of damage. Nothing happens, meaning could have been a bluff from them, but it's hard to say. They pass with open mana up, which is pretty suspicious. And at this point, we attack with everything but the Beetle. So our 1/1 Wing Splicer doesn't really do the best job blocking. Opponent goes for a Burning Oil on the Golem token. So that was what they had last turn when they were thinking about growing the Rock Slide Elemental. So that kills our Golem. Nothing we can do about that, unfortunately. Our counterspell narrowly doesn't work here. The Rock Slide does grow. They take 3 damage. Then we are forced to play Adventhic Infiltrator, try to preserve our life total. They play a land. Attack only in the air, which is a really good sign for us. It means they basically are saying they don't have a way to interact on the ground. Now they play a Cryptic Serpent, which is extremely bad for us. We don't have a good answer to that. We could trade it with the Pathfinder eventually, but right now we're only on 4 lands, so things are looking pretty rough. So now, not drawing a land, we elect to attack for 2 in the air. The Buzzard isn't really blocking anyway. And now I finally get to go for one of the value bounce plays. We get to chump with our Wing Splicer and try to jilt it to our hand. Unfortunately, the opponent does not want this to happen. They have a double negative, which is going to counter that jilt. The jilt, by the way, which would be insane in their deck. So this just turns the Wing Splicer into a gain 6 life and put a counter on the Rock Slide, which is not the end of the world. There are worse spells they could have countered, but still solid play from them. Then they play a Wee Dragonauts, and we are way behind. We top deck the Daring Demolition, and after some deliberation, decide that the Rock Slide Elemental, which is going to grow here if we just kill the Serpent, needs to be eliminated, and unlike the Serpent, can't be blocked very well. So we do kill the smaller creature here. We try to pass to block with the Buzzard on the 1/3. We also chump the Serpent. Opponent does not seem to have a spell to kill the Buzzard. But they do have a Scrapper Champion, 4 mana 2/2 double strike, which, thanks to the energy it gets you, can attack as a 3/3 double strike and remain a 3/3 double strike, which is frankly pretty terrifying. We get to put a Windrider Patrol into play, but we are really hurting for like a Skin Render that would almost get us out of this. And at this point, the opponent plays a Torch Slinger Kicked, hitting our Buzzard, making them discard nothing. And yeah, we lose an important blocker here for staying alive. They get to just jam here. They decide to only attack with their 2 biggest creatures, and we are sort of forced into double blocking the Serpent. They only get to kill 1 creature. It's not completely awful, but just look at the board state. We are never winning this game. And yeah, draw 3 mana 3/2, and somehow this amazing deck is down a game. Alright, we are back here for game 2 of round 2. We have a nice keepable hand here. On the play, the Metallic Rebuke is looking quite a bit better than on the draw. Hoping to get in some kind of tempo with the Stealer of Secrets until the opponent plays a 2-drop. They do attack us for 2. And they go for a Dragonauts post-combat. We just play our 3 mana 3/2 and pass the turn. Can't really ever trade with the 2 mana 2/1, but the opponent just attacks with the 1/3. And plays a Goblin Brawler, misses their land drop. Now turn 5 for us, we're just going to hold up some spells. We have a reasonable double block on the 2/2 first strike and a counter to hopefully get around any kind of combat trick. Peel from Reality should do the trick, haha, if nothing else does. They just attack for 1 and pass, hitting land drop this time. Now we have a Wing Splicer. Not really in love with the idea of playing it into a counter, though. Opponent hits another land drop, attacks us for another 1. We're just passing here. Now we have 7 mana, so we can splice and hold up Rebuke, so it's time to cast the Splicer, which resolves pretty surprisingly. We pass the turn, and the opponent does nothing. Opponent goes for an Echoing Truth on the Golem, which we let resolve because we can't do anything about it. Now we're thinking about a Peel from Reality to bounce their Dragonauts to their hand and bounce the Splicer back to ours. So the only question here is, when do we do this? If we do it now, we effectively gain 3 life, which is pretty nice. If we do it later, like on our turn for instance, then we can have the counter up. If we do it on the end of this turn, then we can't have the counter up and we took the damage, so that seems like the worst option. We end up going with doing it right now. which is a pretty big punish because they have the double negative once again, which makes sense because they were passing for so many turns with mana up. But they didn't see a Metallic Rebuke from us, so it's kind of weird that they didn't counter the Wing Splicer the first time. So now we see beyond. Feels like we're decently far behind here. Get rid of an island and play the Patrol, which is nice, but still not out of the woods yet. We're down 10 life, and the opponent does have an extremely strong deck. They play a Torrent of Stone, instantly killing our flyer, hitting us for 3. Then we find a Jilt for the Wing Splicer, which is pretty nice if we're able to use that at some point. But right now, it just makes more sense to hold up mana. We're only taking 1 here, after all. Now we're going to go for the Repel on their turn, try to prevent them from drawing and replaying it now. See if they have anything here. They do. They have a Geralf's Mind Crusher. Pretty scary card, 6 mana, 5/5, and it doesn't just die once. But with the counter spell, it's just about the perfect answer. Really weird play. They just played this thing into the counter, because we have been representing a counter for a long time. So just questionable that they just decided to play into it, but it worked out very nicely for us. Now, with our other interaction off the table, it's time to bounce and replay the Wing Splicer, effectively just rebuy a 3/3 flyer, which is pretty good here. The opponent has an Atarka Pummeler, pretty scary card, 4/5 that can give Menace if they have 8 power. So we have Serum Visions here, which is a great draw. We find a Screeching Buzzard. We get to bottom an island and top a Skinrender. Get the Buzzard into play. No attack for 3. We're still a little worried about our life total. And there's the Scrapper Champion. Super happy now that we have the Skinrender. Dragonauts are scary too, but we just have to target that Scrapper Champion. It's just way too difficult for us to deal with in combat. So now we pass the turn. Remember, we do have 2 flying blockers now for the Dragonauts. Opponent plays a Lotus Path Djinn, passes the turn. We draw the best card in our deck, a Sphinx of Draar Isle. See a Shipwreck Singer on top, and now that our board presence is pretty massive, the Shipwreck Singer is going to look like a bomb here. Opponent just passes after hitting their land drop. Looks like they're a little bit flooded here. We draw and play the Singer. We get to play our land, planning on making the opponent attack with a bunch of stuff. Let's get this island out of the way here. Though it is a little awkward that even though our board presence is bigger and we can force them to attack, they can give all their stuff Menace, which means we could just die somehow. So we decide to go for it while the Singer is summoning sick and can't activate the second ability, forcing all their small creatures to attack. Before we even do it, the opponent gives everything Menace, which is fine. And we still force the small creatures to attack. Maybe they don't attack with everything, we'll see. They do go for the attack all, basically trying to see if we mess up or play around something that we shouldn't. We put the 2 biggest flyers on the 2/3, so presumably neither can be killed if they don't have a spell. We put the 2 smaller flyers on the 1/3. We put some ground creatures on the 4/5 and on the 2/1 without first strike. Putting the Stealer and the Skinrender on the 4/5 because those are the best ground creatures right now, and we're hoping that at least one of them can survive. So all in all, we're taking 2 damage. We lose 2 creatures here to kill 4 of theirs. And it happens. Miraculously, they have nothing here, and the Shipwreck Singer basically just won the game. Draw the island, engulf the shores on top of our library, which is sweet with the Skinrender and the Wing Splicer, both of which, somehow survived. We get to make a pretty big attack here. We're running a little low on clock and just trying to finish out this game quickly. The opponent takes it. We have 2 blockers. Even if they kill one of our things, we have the Singer to shrink their 2/2, and they give it up at that point. So after a very tense game 2, we're on to game 3. All right, here we are back for game number 3. Another nice keepable hand here for us. Missing double black, but with the Sea Beyond, which should be good. We draw Sphinx of Drawer Isle, once again the best card in our deck, and we Sea Beyond, getting rid of the conditional counter. Now the opponent has 3 mana 2/2 first strike, so we're going to play a Beetle, which can block that better than a 3/2. Opponent attacks, we snap block. It's really nice being on the draw in this matchup and not being under too much pressure. The number of cards in each player's hand is very relevant throughout this match. We're able to drop a Skinrender now while they don't have counter magic up and kill that really annoying Rock Slide elemental. Opponent goes for a Puncturing Blow on the Skinrender. Not the kind of thing you ever really want to be doing because Skinrender's already gotten most of its value just by killing their creature. But we do have some bounce spells, so it's not unreasonable for them to make that play. So we just deploy a Wing Splicer here. Any land gets us to the Jwar Sphinx. Opponent plays a Sphinx of their own, the Ominous Sphinx, 5 mana 4/4 flyer. Definitely pretty chonky. We draw a land, so we're able to get our Sphinx into play. We have maybe some potential repel their Sphinx plus dissolve their Sphinx options, and with the land on top, that is definitely a possibility. Opponent cannot attack into our Sphinx. We draw and play our land. We think about playing a 3/2 here pre-combat, but decide against it. Just attack for 5 and pass the turn because our instants are more relevant than anything else going on. Opponent attacks for 4, so we're going to try to repel that, effectively gain some life and set them back, see if they have a counter. They do not. Opponent goes for a River Serpent, card that can't attack, and even if it could, we just have a bunch of ground blockers, so we don't really care. Get to crack back in here for 8. Serum Visions on top. So yeah, nice 2-turn clock coming up. Get to drop the Reaver, hold up, dissolve for their Ominous Sphinx, and they don't have mana for a counter. Stupid Sphinx, says the opponent. Not unreasonable. Opponent loots and concedes. Jwar Sphinx is in fact a dumb Magic card. Can't blame him there. Alright, back for round number 3. Another die roll 1. Get to play first with this hand, which, thanks to Serum Visions, is keepable. We just are looking for a swamp basically over anything here. So we go turn 1, Island, Serum Visions, draw a card. It's a spell, bottom 2 spells, Instant Regret, praying for a swamp, and we find one magically. Singer onto the battlefield, and the opponent plays a 2 mana 1/2 that makes us discard a card when it dies. Hitting land drops here is amazing for us, specifically second swamp, which is going to allow us to play Skinrender. We attack for 1, just like the opponent did, and yeah, just passing with a repel. We are waiting for a better target for the Skinrender. Opponent plays an Axebane Guardian, which we don't much care about. No need to repel. Attack for 1. Play a Windrider Patrol. Pass the turn. Opponent has a 6 mana removal for the Patrol. Attacks us for 1 again. And we draw land, or oops, we draw a 6 mana 5/5, which we dump into play here. Pretty formidable threat on this board. The opponent does not attack into it, which is a little interesting. Might want to make us take a point of damage if they don't want to chump with it. But presumably they're chumping here. We still attack, and they do not chump, so they don't want to make us discard a card. Pretty convenient for us, so now we get to pass with a few instants available. Opponent plays a 3 mana 2/2 Fear. No need to counter that. And they play Priest of the Forgotten Gods. now we have a nice line available with the Skin Render. So we get to play the Skin Render after attacking, of course. We get to Skin Render the Priest to prevent them from sacrificing anything, like that discard thing. And thanks to the Shipwreck Singer, we get to force them to attack their 3-mana 2/2 Fear into the Skin Render. So the opponent goes for the 9-mana flashback on the removal to kill the Singer, when the most the Singer is going to do is happening right now. So it's too late. Probably should have killed the 3/3 there, but regardless, it's a tough spot for them. So we force the 2/2 to attack. Skin Render eats it. And yeah, another attack for 8. We have Looter Ilkor coming up. Opponent's still not blocking with the Zubera. Get the Looter into play, holding up Dissolve, Engulf, and Repel. Opponent plays a Hardy Veteran, which doesn't much matter. Attacks for 1, decides against it, and concedes. Alright, here we are with this kind of weird hand for game 2. We're going to keep it though. Opponent has a turn 1 Deathrite Shaman, which is kind of scary. Attacks us for 1. We play a Shipwreck Looter. Looks like they could be color screwed as well with only forests. They do not attack with the Deathrite or play a land. So we're going to attack. Then we're going to play that Stealer of Secrets, try to get some tempo going here while they are missing interaction, just things to do. We mess up a little bit here by going land first into the Serum Visions. Technically this plays around some kind of instant speed removal before the Visions resolves on the Stealer, because we get to hold up Dissolve. But it would have been way, way better here to just wait, because we find that Swamp, which we would have loved to use to get the Scoundrels into play. Attack with both. Opponent chump blocks very, very strangely. Does not make any sense at all. Opponent plays an Axebane Guardian now, which, in addition to blocking the Stealer of Secrets, would fix their mana problems. So that's something we're interested in countering here. So kind of rewarded for playing that island out. Continue to attack with both here. We brought in the Coast Watcher against the green deck, and now we're going to deploy it and the Wanted Scoundrels. Opponent's still stuck on lands. Let's see what they can do here. Find a Desperate Castaways, which is kind of annoying. Good against what we have going on. But their life total is pretty low. So we make the obvious attack. Then we play the Pathfinder post-combat. Opponent plays Undercity Scavenger, which would be a little bit annoying if they sacrificed the other thing, the Castaways, so it would be a 5/5. But also, if they make that play, they're dead on board, so that doesn't work out super well for them. So they decide not to sack, and we just attack with everything because it will kill them very, very quickly. They try to block like this, then they realize they're taking lethal if they do that, so they have to chomp the Pathfinder and trade for the Scoundrels. So they take 5, give us a card. They get some treasure, we draw Jilt, which should be good enough to seal the game here. They play a Death's Head Buzzard and sack some treasure here to play a Flesh Allergy to try to destroy that Pathfinder. Make us lose some life as well. We're thinking about whether to Jilt it or not. Doesn't really matter. They're dead on board. And even though, remember, the Death's Head Buzzard does trigger, killing 2 of our creatures, the Stealer is going to survive and be a lethal threat. So while we're thinking about whether we should Jilt the Pathfinder, which is probably a pretty obvious yes, I don't really know. Maybe they have like a Slaughter Pact to kill the Stealer, but regardless, they concede in the meantime. And yeah, we end up going 3-0 with this amazing deck. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again soon.